This is Dolynny TV, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another edition of Edmonton Oilers discussion here on the channel this afternoon. And I just want to quickly try and spend 10 minutes as focused as possible on the situation that we find ourselves in as Oilers fans. About a month and a little bit away from the trade deadline, I've discussed all the names that make sense so far besides Tyler Toffoli for this Edmonton Oilers team. Although you talk about Tyler Toffoli and the Edmonton Oilers, that talk's really nosedived since Kailer Yamamoto became a big part of that second line, taking away what is, well, technically what would a Toffoli spot been on this Edmonton Oilers club. Now, obviously, we have the discussion about Zach Kassian and all that, and I'm sure I will get to that either today, tomorrow, or sometime in between the skates, because let me tell you, that throws a whole wrench into things as well. But you look at it this way, right? With Zach Kassian, the big thing is just reasonable contract, reasonable term, all's good. Really, realistically, you keep it at 3 years, you're not going to die from it. So that said, that kind of diagnoses what's happening with the top line for the Edmonton Oilers, right? Neal, McDavid, Kassian, Neal, McDavid, Archibald, however you want to roll it. It seems to make sense. The top line is not the concern. The second line was more of a concern, and all of a sudden you've got Nugent Hopkins, Draisaitl, and Yamamoto producing. So that crosses off box number one where it says, what are the Oilers' needs going into the trade deadline, as I mentioned, a month and a little bit away? Well, simply put, top six forward, 4 right now. Let's be serious. 4 right now does not seem to be a need, because you can argue, yes, it's always going to be a need with our Edmonton Oilers team, but look at it this way. You've got Neal, you've got Kassian in the top 6, right? You play a team like Calgary, you play any team that wants to play McDavid tough, you realistically have to have a guy that's capable of producing as well as defending players in Zach Kassian on that line to some extent. James Neal can do it to a little bit. He's got a little bit thunderous streak to him, but that's about it. That's about it. So you've got James Neal who can shoot the puck. Just need him to learn to shoot the puck more from grade A opportunity spots, and of course bang it home when it's loose in the crease a little bit more. We've seen it 19 times this year, mind you, but you know, there can always be more, right? Oilers fans are never satisfied. That's something I've said, and in that aspect of the Oilers game, I'm not satisfied. So top 6 forward for right now, as long as Yamamoto keeps producing, let's put an X on that. Don't need that. That then moves us into the bottom 6. And this is where you can kind of look and, well, yeah, I'd like this, I'd like that, I'd like this, and I'd like that. Realistically, end of the day, it comes down to liking the fact that you need a third line centerman. Bona fide third line centerman. Problem is, with a bona fide third line centerman, this definitely, yes, check mark, need, definitely. But we'll discuss for a second here why it's a tough one to sell, right? Is you look at how much our top 6 or our bottom 6 centermen are making, it's less than $1 million each, or I think Gaetan Haas is just making $1 million. I don't know what the cap figure. I think Gaetan Haas is at $925 if I'm not mistaken. But let me just quickly get you the cap space right now, sitting with $1.25 million before Matt Benning comes back. Yeah, Gaetan Haas 9.25, so, or 9.925, however you want to write it, less than $1 million. So right there, yeah, okay, it's tough because those two guys fill in the hole, Sheehan and Haas, for less than $1 million each. How are you going to plug in someone at $1 million or more into that situation when realistically we're going to have limited cap space? That's where you have to find a trade for Sam Gagner. And I think any third line centerman trade is going to involve some big money, right? If it's one of our defensemen in Chris Russell, Adam Larsson. I know everybody keeps suggesting Clefbaum. Don't be going there. Don't be going there. Don't be silly. Much more rather move Nurse before Clefbaum. Now let's be serious. Okay, so Larsson, Russell, that's kind of where, or Gagner, that's kind of the money you're talking about. If you can swing a deal to move out Brandon Manning, all the much better. All the much better. But is it going to happen? It would have probably happened by now if it was going to happen. So let's stop dreaming. And realistically, yeah, you've got 3 names, but 2 of those names are integral parts of our defense this season, right? Obviously, Adam Larsson almost to a lesser extent than Chris Russell so far, but that's because the games played. And man, you imagine if Adam Larsson would have been able to get a good game and stretch of games to start the season under his belt, we'd probably see a little bit different Adam Larsson so far this year. Then again, the Oilers could also be the basement team if he had been in the lineup all year. So who are we to know? That's the tough question right there. But you've got two guys around $4 million. That's a lot of cap space. Sam Gagner at 3.15. Okay, all of a sudden you move one of those guys, you get value added, player and prospect, however you do it, player and pick for a third line centerman. Suddenly, okay, we're talking business. We're good. Now, all right, the other side too is if you're moving something and you need something really grand, right? Like maybe a third line centerman that can play in your top six, right? If you're talking throwing him on the wing like you do with Nugent Draisaitl, maybe if Yamamoto starts slumping back a bit, well, then all of a sudden you might be working a Jesse Puljujarvi with Sam Gagner and a pick kind of deal. So there's several ways you can go about it, right? Okay, straight up top six forward, third line centerman that can play top six, like jigger it a bit, and there's a couple of ideas of how you could do it. But realistically, right, X on the top six forward, check mark on the third line centerman. Now, the other side too, the name Wayne Simmonds has been mentioned, and that's because a guy who adds that dimension of grit in the bottom six. The problem is, we already are supposed to have a Wayne Simmonds type player, especially a player that's capable of playing Wayne Simmonds games at a much younger age and lesser cap hit, that being Jujhar Khaira, but we just aren't getting that out of Jujhar Khaira, which now introduces what do you do with Jujhar Khaira. We've already discussed that, but you look at Wayne Simmonds, guys, he's making $5 million this year. Unless the Devils 8 major cap, we really couldn't do much of a trade there. So you got to find somebody around the league. If checkmark number 2 on this team is a gritty third line, I don't know if you'd call it power forward, scoring winger, whatever you want to say, on the third line. Because ultimately, what we're lacking in Jujhar Khaira is what we need on that third line. And okay, arguably, yeah, you know what, maybe you add the dimension of a guy like Nygaard instead of a guy like that. You let Sheehan and Archibald go to work, but those guys all combined together don't add up to a lot of size on the third line, which everybody's going to yell in the playoffs, you need this, that, and the other thing, right? So, right in there, that's why it's a check mark. The Oilers do need that big-time grip, but they can get it within the organization in Jujhar Khaira if he returns to the form from a couple of years ago. That's all he has to do is get back to being big body Jujhar, and suddenly the problems are solved. Problem is, he hasn't been that guy, except for maybe a stretch or two here for 2 or 3 games this season, where he has been. We haven't had that guy for, well, because of injury, partly last year, for quite a bit. So, tough go, right? It's how do you figure it out at that point? But, oh my. Hold on, we gotta watch Matt Benning's hit down there in the Condors land at some point today. I saw my phone flashing, pardon me. But, right, so check mark that. But I think my biggest check mark, as an Oilers fan, this is something we've coveted for a long time, is finding that big time top 3, top 2, number 1 defenseman. And ultimately, I never expected to see this, but I saw it floated somewhere online today of the Oilers possibly getting Mr. Dustin Byfuglien from the Winnipeg Jets, which would be really interesting if they were to pull it off. I'd need to read more, and I don't want to be floating that out there, but maybe that's something we have to discuss in a video later tonight, right? A couple of ideas coming to me as we discuss. Like I said, this one's just more of a ramble about kind of trying to check off the boxes of what we need, because we're good on depth D, right? We've got Legason, we've got Benning, we've got Jones, we've got Russell, we've got everybody. If you need Bouchard, he's ready. If you've got enough guys in the system that you can make that work depth-wise. We're not going to be hurting if we lose somebody for a short midterm period of time. But definitely, guys, like Adam Larsson has not been that elite guy we were hoping he would be this year. He's been good, but he hasn't been up here. And that's what this Oilers team's been missing since that real good 16-17 year out of Adam Larsson. So, right, again, similar to that third line winger scoring force of nature kind of deal I was talking about with Jujhar. Maybe you have that in the blue line already. It's just a matter of a guy stepping up and doing it. Darnell Nurse could be that guy. gaffes a little bit defensively, but because of what I heard on Overtime Open Line coming back from the game on Saturday, I'm willing to kind of bet the message from the coaches is simple in the fact that Darnell's allowed to be a little bit more gaffy defensively because he can be so good defensively and he's so good offensively. So, right, that's the exact thing, is we don't have straight up that guy who's elite on both sides of the puck and shuts it down either side of the puck, right? We don't have that guy that takes the blast from the point and scores half the time, it seems. We don't have that guy every time across the line the guy's on the ice, right? That's kind of where I'm getting at, is that would be a big old check mark, but finding that at the trade deadline and paying for that in a push for the playoffs might be a little bit ridiculous. So you look center back to where we're looking at needs, right? We can talk about goaltending, but we're kind of suckered into both these goalies for the entire year, so don't even go dreaming about it. Talk about the offseason a little bit when we have some goalie money. But right now, the check marks, the biggest check marks, continue to be on this team in the bottom six. Check line, third line centerman with the capability to play in the top six. Check mark, third line winger with the big body that can score some goals and produce some offense. That's realistically, guys. I know we want to talk about the top six forward. We want to talk about the back end. That's pretty much, yes, it's a big check mark in my books, but pretty much an X at this point due to price and due to availability. And goaltending is just an X because of trade clauses. And you know what? I'm going to take my chances. So, guys, it's interesting. You know what? We're a couple of weeks away still, so I wanted to get this one out here. I've done player-specific targets. Now I just wanted to talk loosely about the whole situation, what you could do. And obviously one name I didn't mention, I mentioned Bufflin because I'd seen that name. Matt Dumba, a guy that I think's out there, and Darren Dreger mentioned in the same time when I was talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs forwards. So float it out there, right? Why not? Let's get it going. Guys, I'm Tyson, this is Dolynny TV. I will catch you in the next one.